All right, people. This is part 3 of my top 10 best and worst years of hip hop. Before I go any further, there's a few things that I forgot to mention in part 1 and part 2. DMX did release a good album in 2006, Year of the Dog Again, and so did Coolio, Return of the Gangsta. And yeah, if anything that I mentioned that I forgot to mention in part 1 of my top 10 worst years of hip hop that was good, let me know in the comments down below. But that was my top 10 worst years. Now the best. I'm gonna try to fly with this shit. But first, I'm gonna read y'all the honorable mentions of my top 10 best years of hip hop. The honorable mentions goes to 1987, 1989, 1992, 1995, 1997, 2000, 2003, and 2004. Now for the real list. Number 10, 1999. 99 was a good year for obvious reasons. Nas became the third solo hip hop artist to release 2 platinum albums in 1 year. He released I Am and he released Nostradamus, which was kind of a disappointing album. But he did make a comeback when he released Stillmatic. Will Smith released his second solo album, Will Millennium. Eminem came out with the Slim Shady LP. That's when he was making noise with Hi, My Name Is. Dr. Dre, of course, released The Chronic 2001, a follow-up to The Chronic. MF Doom released Operation Doomsday, which was good. Foxy Brown released her second album, China Doll. Keith Murray, while he was in jail, released his third album, It's a Beautiful Thing. Mobb Deep released Murder Music. Q-Tip released his solo debut album, Amplified. DMX released And Then There Was X. Method Man and Redman released my favorite album of theirs, Blackout, my all-time favorite hip-hop album. 8Ball and MJG released In Our Lifetime Volume 1. ODB released Nigga Please. Missy Elliott released The Real World. Ja Rule released his debut album, Veni Veni Vici. Eve released her debut album, Let There Be Eve, Rough Riders First Lady. Tupac and the Outlaws released Still I Rise. Tech Nine released The Calm Before the Storm. There was a lot of good artists that came out with albums in 99. If your name wasn't Eminem, Ja Rule, DMX, Jay-Z, Nas, Dr. Dre, Missy Elliott, The Roots, Pharoah Monch, Mos Def, Mobb Deep, Will Smith, 8Ball and MJG, Rakim, ODB, The GZA, Snoop, Eve, Raekwon, Will Smith, Juvenile, Method Man and Redman, you ain't selling shit. If you're not the artist that I mentioned that came out with albums in 1999, then what are you selling? And Slick Rick, he released The Art of Storytelling, which was also a good album. But yeah, 99 was definitely a great year. Number 9, 2002. 2002 was a solid year. That was the year Nas came out with that Godson. That was a good album. And you had Jay-Z coming out with The Blueprint too. Clips released their second album but first major label album, Lord Willin'. Scarface released The Fix. his first and only album under Def Jam South. Snoop released Paid the Cost to Be the Boss. Of course, Nelly released Nellyville. Nori released his fourth solo album, God's Favorite, or his third solo album. Eve released her album, Evolution. Tech N9ne released Absolute Power. 50 Cent released his mixtape, Guess Who's Back. Of course, Eminem released the Eminem Show, which was the last good album he released. I gotta tell you, Eminem was untouchable in 2002. Nobody could touch Eminem that year. Not even Jay-Z. Exhibit released his fourth album, Man vs. Machine, which was a good album. Underrated. DJ Jazzy Jeff released his solo debut album, The Magnificent. Ja Rule released The Last Temptation. That Tupac posthumous album, Better Days, was a good album. People Under the Stairs released OST. Rest in peace to Double K. Busta Rhymes released It Ain't Safe No More. Cam'ron released Come Home With Me, which was a good album. RZA released Legend of the Liquid Sword. Jurassic 5 released Power in Numbers. J-Live released All of the Above. Nas released his mixtape, The Lost Tapes. Talib Kweli released Quality. There was a lot of good albums that came out in 2002. It was definitely a solid year. Number 8. The Year That I Was Born, 1991. Taking it back to the early 90s. Ed OG and the Bulldogs released Life of a Kid in the Ghetto with that song I Gotta Have It and Be a Father to Your Child. Be a Father to Your Child has to be one of the realest songs in the history of hip hop, next to Brenda's Got a Baby. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince released their fourth album, Home Base. Yeah, Home Base, with that song Summertime. Of course, Ice Cube released that Death Certificate album. Scarface and the Ghetto Boys released We Can't Be Stopped. A Tribe Called Quest released The Low End Theory. Main Source released Breaking Anthems. DJ Quick released Quick Is the Name. De La Soul released De La Soul Is Dead. Ice-T released my favorite album of his, OG Original Gangsta. Another thing about 2002, Coolio released his fifth album, El Cool Magnifico, in 2002. Of course, Public Enemy released Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Black, in 91. Scarface released his solo debut album, Mr. Scarface Is Back. And then you had that Tupac album, Tupacalypse Now. That's when Tupac really made a name for himself following his success, part of Digital Underground, with that song Brenda's Got a Baby and Trapped and If My Homies Call. Brenda's Got a Baby is one of the realest songs in the history of hip hop. Who else? Black Sheep released A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing with those songs, The Choice Is Yours, thanks to NBA Street Volume 2, and Flavor of the Month. NWA released their second and final album, Niggas for Life. Busta Rhymes and leaders of the New School released A Future Without a Past. Who else? Cypress Hill released their debut self-titled album. Heavy D and the Boys released Peaceful Journey. Slick Rick released his third album, The Rule Is Back. Nice and Smooth released their second album, Ain't a Damn Thing Changed. Naughty by Nature released their debut self-titled album in 91. Master P released his debut album, Get Away Clean. Chubb Rock released The One. Of course, Biz Markie released I Need a Haircut. GZA released Words from the Genius. The Juice soundtrack was released in 1991. There was a lot of good albums that came out in 91. Prince of Darkness from Big Daddy Kane. Act Like You Know from MC Lyte. Ain't a Damn Thing Changed by Dub C and the Mad Circle. Yeah, 91 was definitely a good year for hip hop, especially since I was born that year. All right, number 7, 2001. 2001 has to be one of the most underrated years of hip hop from the 2000s decade. 2001, remember when I said Eminem was untouchable in 2002? But 2001, he was really untouchable. Nobody was fucking with Eminem back when he was in his prime. That was the year he dissed Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, and he ended his fucking career. He dissed Everlast from House of Pain. He killed his solo career. Everlast ain't been the same since. That's when him and D12 released their first album, Devil's Night. Ludacris and Busta Rhymes released their albums the same day in 2001. Busta Rhymes released Genesis and Ludacris released Word of Mouth. Jay-Z and Fabolous also released their albums on 9/11, The Blueprint and Ghetto Fabulous. Coolio released his fourth album, Coolio.com, in 2001. Of course, DMX was doing his thing with his fourth album, The Great Depression. His fourth album hitting number 1 on the Billboard 200. Of course, Ja Rule released Pain is Love with that song Always on Time and Down Ass Chick. Making all these love songs and shit. Ja Rule, he was killing it in 2001. Redman released Malpractice, which was an underrated album. Jada released his solo debut album, Kiss the Game Goodbye. That Tupac posthumous album, Until the End of Time, was released, which was a good album. Eve released her second album, Scorpion, because you know Eve is a Scorpio. Who else? Run DMC released their 7th or 6th and final album, Crown Royal. Mobb Deep released Infamy, which was a good album. Mystical released Tarantula. That was a good album. Wu-Tang released Iron Flag, their first album without ODB. Bow Wow released his second album, Doggy Bag. Romeo released his debut self-titled album. Nelly and the Saint Lunatics released their debut and only album, Free City. Foxy Brown released her third album, Broken Silence. Cypress Hill released Stone Raiders. Puff Daddy and the Family released The Saga Continues. Of course, Nas made a comeback with that Stillmatic album after the disappointing release of Nostradamus. That's when he came out with Ether, Got Yourself a Gun, and One Mic. My favorite Nas album has to be Stillmatic. I love Illmatic, but Stillmatic to me was better. Master Ace released Disposable Arts. Missy released Miss E So Addictive. Ghostface released Bulletproof Wallets. Benny Siegel released The Reason in 2001. Yeah, 2001 was one of the most underrated years of hip-hop from the 2000s decade. Most definitely. Number 6, 1994. Yeah, I definitely had to put 1994 on here. I know that's the year Nas released that Illmatic album. And you know who else made their debut in 94? Outkast. Southern Playlist, Cadillac Music. CL Smooth and Pete Rock released their second and final album, The Main Ingredient. Scarface released The Diary. The Beastie Boys released 3 Communication. Method Man released his debut solo album, To Cal. Redman released There Is a Dark Side. Keith Murray also making his debut in 1994 with The Most Beautifulest Thing in This World. Common released his second album, Resurrection. Shaq released his second album, Shaq Fu The Return. The Brat released her debut album, Functified, the first solo female hip-hop artist to go platinum. That was also the year Biggie came out, the debut of the Notorious B.I.G. Biggie was the shit in 1994. He had a lot of songs from that Ready to Die album that got airplayed on the radio, like Gimme the Loot, Juicy. Juicy was a hit. That song with Method Man, The What? Big Papa, that was also his biggest hit. Warning, that was also a biggest hit. The one song he couldn't put on the radio was Suicidal Thoughts. He couldn't put that song on the damn radio. Anyway, Biggie was killing it in 1994. Craig Mack released his debut album a week after Biggie released his with Project Funk the World with that song's Flavor in Your Ear and Get Down. I really wish Craig Mack would have put the remix of Flavor in Your Ear on that Project Funk the World. He should have put the remix on there. He only has the original, but I wish he would have put the remix on there. The remix of Flavor in Your Ear is better than the original. MOP released their debut album on my sister's first birthday, To the Death. That was also a good album. Rappin' Forte released Don't Fight the Feeling. Spice One released America's Nightmare. Bone Thugs released Creepin' On, I Come Up. Big Daddy Kane released Daddy's Home. 3-6 Mafia released Smoked Out. Loped Out. The Lynch Mob released Planet of the Apes. A-Ball and MJG released their second album, On the Outside Looking In. Black Sheep released Non-Fiction. Nice and Smooth released their third album in 1994. What's the name of it? What's the name of that album? Jewel of the Nile. That was the name of Nice and Smooth's third album that was released in 94. 94 was the domination year of hip-hop. Oh, Gang Starr released my favorite album of theirs, Hard to Earn, in 1994. Diggable Planets released Blowout Cone. Warren G, of course, released Regulate G-Funk Era. Tupac and Thug Life released Thug Life Volume 1. Public Enemy released Music and Our Mess Age. That was definitely a good album. Lords of the Underground released Keepers of the Funk. They was killing it in 1994 with all these classic albums. But I talked about 94 long enough. Now we get to the top 5. Number 5, 1985. This is one reason why I had to put this in my top 5 and why I put this on my list. because Run DMC was the first hip hop group to ever go platinum with their second album, King of Rock. I know LL Cool J's debut album was released that year as well, and it also went platinum, but the first hip hop group to ever go platinum was Run DMC. That was also their first album to ever be released on a CD. Run DMC, King of Rock. That's the main reason why I had to put 1985 on this list. I know other albums that came out in 1985, such as The Fat Boys Are Back, UTFO, Curtis Blow. Too Short released Players in 1985. Dougie Fresh released the show / Lottie Dottie Die. But the reason why I put 1985 on here is because the first hip hop group to ever go platinum was Run DMC. The World Class Wrecking Crew released World Class in 1985. Dr. Dre was with them at the time. Number 4, 1988. I definitely had to put 1988 on here. That was the year Slick Rick released his debut album, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. And EPMD released their debut album, Strictly Business. Big Daddy Kane released Long Live the Kane. NWA released their debut album in 1988, Straight Outta Compton. Public Enemy released their second album on my auntie's birthday, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. That album will be 35 years old this Wednesday. Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Eric B. and Rakim released their second album, Follow the Leader, in 1988. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince released He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. Kid and Play released their debut album, Too Hype. Biz Markie released Going Off in 1988. Ice-T released his second album, Power, in 1988. Eazy-E released his solo debut album, Easy Does It. Too Short released Life Is Too Short. Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock released It Takes Two. Salt and Pepper released Assault with a Deadly Pepper. MC Hammer released Let's Get It Started, which is his second album. Sir Mix-a-Lot released Swass. The Ghetto Boys released Making Trouble. JJ Fad released Supersonic. Oh yeah, Run DMC released Tougher Than Leather in 1988. If you were around during 1988, let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts about the year 1988 and 1985? Because I was not born during those years, but hip-hop was still at its peak in the 80s. I know my folks definitely missed the 80s era of hip-hop. Definitely. Back when they had artists like Eric B. and Rakim, LL Cool J, T La Rock, Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, Kid and Play, The Beastie Boys, Run DMC, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Slick Rick, Dana Dane, etc. I know my folks definitely missed the 80s era of hip-hop. Most definitely. Number 3, 1998. I know y'all thinking, does he have 1998 on this list? Yes, I do, and I had to put it in my top 3. Despite that Tupac and Biggie were already gone, hip-hop was still at its peak in 1998. We had a lot of hip-hop albums that came out that year that is now 25 or that's turning 25. Like Juvie, 400 Degrees, Redman, Doc's the Name, Method Man, Tikal 2000, Judgment Day, Busta Rhymes, ELE Extent Level Event, Mystical, Ghetto Fabulous. Big Pun was hot as fire in 1998 with his debut album Capital Punishment. These 4 albums were released on the same day in 98. Outkast, Aquemini, A Tribe Called Quest, The Love Movement, Black Star, Mos Def and Talib Kweli are Black Star, and Jay-Z Hard Knock Life Volume 2. Gang Starr released their 5th album, which is Yusuke Knight's favorite, Moment of Truth. Nori released his debut self-titled album, Noriega. DMX was the best rapper in 1998. He dropped 2 #1 platinum albums that year. He had his Dark and Hella Top, which is his best work, and that second album, Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. Exhibit released my favorite album of his, 40 Days and 40 Nights. J.O. Felony released What You Gonna Do, and Lauryn Hill released her debut and only album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Pete Rock released his solo debut album, Soul Survivor. AZ released his second album, Pieces of a Man, underrated. MOP released their 3rd album, First Family for Life. The Beastie Boys released Hello Nasty. Master P released MP The Last Don in 98. 8Ball released his solo debut album, Lost. The Lox released their debut album, Money, Power, Respect. People Under the Stairs released their debut album, The Next Step. Rest in peace to Double K. Silk the Shocker released Charge It to the Game. Snoop released his first album with Master P and No Limit, The Game Is to Be Sold, Not to Be Told. Scarface released My Homies. The Greatest Hits from Tupac was released in 1998. Ice Cube released Volume 1 of War and Peace. Man. Oh, Fat Joe released Don Carter Jeter, his 3rd album. Man. I wish we could go back to 1998 in hip-hop. But hip-hop will never be the same again because it's garbage as fuck today. Oh, Onyx released their 3rd album, Shut 'Em Down, and Cameron released Confessions of Fire in 98. Cannabis released Can I Bust in 1998. Number 2, 1996. Tupac, All Fucking Day. This was the year of Tupac when he released that All Eyes on Me album. And that was also the year Nas released It Was Written. But you know, Nas's song Street Dreams and Tupac's All Eyes on Me both have the same type beat. But I think Nas' song did it better than Tupac's, to be honest. I mean, I'm sorry, Nas' song just killed the beat. In my opinion, Nas' song did it best. Of course, Jay-Z released Reasonable Doubt in 96. Mobb Deep released Hell on Earth. Foxy Brown released Il Nana. Shaq released his 3rd album, You Can't Stop the Rain. Snoop released The Dogfather. Eminem released his debut album, Infinite, back when he was an underground rapper before he got signed to Aftermath. Who else? Busta Rhymes, The Coming. What other? Wild Cowboy by Sadat X, a Brand Nubian. Big Noyd released Episodes of a Hustler in 96. Matter of fact, Tupac dropped 2 classic albums that year. The Don Illuminati 7-Day Theory. Outkast released ATLiens. The Fugees released The Score, Muddy Waters by Redman, Enigma by Keith Murray, Firing Squad by MOP, Stakes is High by De La Soul, Hardcore by Lil Kim, Iron Man by Ghostface, A Tribe Called Quest, Beats, Rhymes, and Life. Exhibit released his debut album At the Speed of Life. Master P released Ice Cream Man. E40 released The Hall of Game. But in my opinion, 1996 was the year of Tupac. Tupac dominated 1996. That was the year he died too, and he dominated that year. The first to release 2 #1 platinum albums the same year. Crucial Conflict released The Final Tick. West Side Connection released Bound Down. Lost Boys released Legal Drug Money. Ice-T released 6, Return of the Real. Chino XL released Here to Save You All. Silk the Shocker released The Shocker. Quad City DJs released Get Up On Up and Dance. Dr. Dre released Dr. Dre Presents The Aftermath. Chapter 1, The End by 3-6 Mafia. And Getting It by Too Short, which that was supposed to be his last album. 96 was the shit. I definitely had to put that in my top 2. I know I could have put 95 on this list, but I had to put it as an honorable mention because that was the beginning of that East Coast, West Coast feud. That's caused us to lose Tupac and Biggie. Unbelievable. Okay, number 1, 1993. 93 was a great year. You had Strictly For My Niggas from Tupac. You had Home Invasion by Ice-T. You had Black Sunday by Cypress Hill. Wu-Tang, Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. A Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders. Back the Fuck Up by Onyx. Enter the Stage by Black Moon. Return of the Boom Bap by KRS-One. Of course, Snoop released Doggy Style in 93. Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre dominated 1993. Tupac was a beast. Dr. Dre in his heyday was a beast. Snoop, he wasn't a beast, but he was solid in 93. Till Death Do Us Part by the Ghetto Boys. Black Rain by Queen Latifah with that song UNITY. The World Is Yours by Scarface. Souls of Mischief, 93 till Infinity. Too Short released Get In Where You Fit In.